Well, welcome. Thanks for having me. Jeff Weninger, State Representative, and the Speaker just arrived as well. Let's go over a few things, I guess. One, it's quite a different year with Speaker Mesnard. Not just saying this because he's here. The trains are running on time. Everybody seems, well, you would know it a little bit from last night, but overall, everybody's getting along a lot better. I mean, you've heard the other side, the other party on numerous TV shows, they've been asked, how are things this year? How are you getting along? Are you getting your bills heard? Is your voice being heard? And it's been a resounding yes so far. I was even teasing Rebecca Rios about it, and she goes, well, what can I say? It has been. It's been really positive. We've seen a lot of Democrat bills, quite a few, come out of the chamber. I've supported a lot. I've supported Democrat amendments to my own bill last night, even when there was hostile amendments as well. So it's been a good start so far. I'm going to go over some individual things very quickly, and then I think the Speaker will be able to give, maybe a little bit more broad overview of where we're going with, maybe the budget and different things, where we're at on that. But some things I'm working on and some things that I think apply to Chandler businesses in the city specifically. And it's been a pleasure to work with Ryan, who is here with the city, and he's done a great job. He's been there he is, bouncing back and forth. We've had a lot of issues this year that affect cities, and some, I've been kind of half in, half out, and sometimes it's good that, people always want, well, where are you exactly at on this? And it's a moving target, There's giblet reform this year, and I was kind of half in, half out. Giblets we've used here in Chandler, and they're a good strategic tool, but they've been abused by other communities, Phoenix and Tempe mainly. And sometimes we've even been at a competitive disadvantage because we don't use giblets a whole lot in Chandler. It puts us at a competitive disadvantage with people who just basically blanket their entire downtown with giblets, and they're basically renting those places for a lot cheaper than what we're renting here. But there was a lot of discussion, a lot of negotiation, and they came to a negotiated agreement on the giblets that the league supported and everybody supported, so that got voted out. TPT reform is still moving. I'm not exactly sure where it is. As it stands right now, I do not support the current bill. It's just too big of a hit to Chandler taxpayers, and we would have to make it up, and it just, in the current form, it's something that I can't support. There's a bill of mine that deals with movers. There's a lot of good movers, but a few movers who work in a bad way. That got voted out of the House. It's on its way to the Senate, or it is at the Senate. It's a bill I'm running for the Attorney General, which basically will not allow a moving company to hold your goods hostage once they get to you and try to extort extra money out of you. This happens a lot. The AG's had over 200 complaints in 2 years, and this is really going to give the AG some extra teeth to prosecute these people who are holding hostage loads. It was interesting when I took this bill on, how many people, when I talked to somebody, they said, that happened to my grandma, that happened to my friend. It happens to a lot of people, and it's unacceptable, and so we're looking to move that through. Another bill that I've worked very, I would say, painstakingly close and too close with the league on, got to know everybody over there a little too much, is small cell technology bill. This is an insanely important bill for all cities, for constituents, for everyone. While at the same time, we're trying to balance, the aesthetics and the cities to be able to still have self-control over the right-of-way to a point. So what we're doing is creating a predictable regulatory framework that is going to allow the cell companies to come in and deploy these smaller cell technology all throughout the valley. All throughout the state in a rapid way. If we don't do this, people aren't going to have data coverage pretty soon. It's going to endanger public safety and a lot of other things. They're not going around putting up the large, there's still going to be a few, but it's not like you're going to have every city council meeting anymore. They're going to be putting up brand new cell towers. We're going to the small cell technology. It doesn't go near as far, but it is going to be the road to 5G. You cannot have 5G without this. And the data usage, I mean, everybody look at the phone. Probably almost everybody has a smartphone. I don't know if anybody still has a flip phone anymore, but a few people do. My dad does. But everything's going to data. I mean, if you look at the statistics, AT&T put out statistics of the Phoenix Open this last year. Yeah, it was a little bit more people participated, about 30,000 more. Grand scheme of things, that's not a whole lot. AT&T, just them, their data usage went up 60% from last year. And that's astounding. Uber, everything of the new Internet of Things is done on this. And the tough thing is you cannot predict the cell companies, and everybody's having a tough time predicting how quickly these companies are going to scale. I mean, Uber went to scale insanely quick, and Lyft. Now you have things like Uber Eats, DoorDash, Amazon Delivery. Everybody's using these things, and when they use them, they're using data. And people don't necessarily trust to log into a Wi-Fi here, whether it's going to be secure or not. So data usage is going to just continue to skyrocket, and if they don't deploy this in a rapid way, people are going to have diminished signals. I'm running a bill for the manufacturers in the state. This manufacturing bill goes to rules on Monday. This is to help the manufacturers, Intel, Boeing, Raytheon, Honeywell, all these big manufacturers, do something with a lot of these R&D tax credits that are on the state's books. It's going to help expand manufacturing more and more here within the current companies. But what I really like is what the former president and the current president are both saying. They both said that the corporate income tax rate is a problem. They both said we need to figure out a way to allow manufacturers to repatriate this money. I really think if we get this bill done, it's going to put us in prime position for when some of that money is repatriated. We're going to be at the top of the list competitively to bring some of these big-time manufacturers here. I'll try to go through these very quickly because I know the speaker has to get out of here. I have a bill on vehicle reduction fleet. I worked with council members. We did a very good job a few years ago reducing Chandler's fleet. And you guys got some press lately on it because Don Lang did an interview with someone where they were referring to that when we were talking about this bill. Chandler has saved millions and millions of dollars because the hard work council did a few years ago and maintaining that through current councils, saving money on the fleet. We had tons of cars that people drove maybe 2 times a week, but it was their own car that they were issued. So they went to more of a pool fleet. Some people still have their own vehicles, but shrunk the fleet by well over 200 vehicles. If you're buying a new one of those every 5 years, 200 vehicles, in the state the average is $21,000 a vehicle. And then you talk about maintenance and everything, you're talking a lot of money very quickly. So we're looking to do the same thing at the state level. State reduce its light duty inventory by 10% a year for the next 2 years. If they need to supplement that with other things, we're having them look more of a study-wise and a demonstration project-wise of using the private sector. Everybody in the news stories focused on Uber because that makes a sexy headline. I never named a company in the bill. In fact, I think Uber and the ride shares are going to be more of a minimal thing that you plug this in with. I think it's going to be more fleet management. It's going to be just more reducing the fleet. Rental car companies will park assets around your government facilities, and you have electronic ways of picking them up and taking it, and it tracks it. But this is something we got to do, and I'm not looking to compel the cities to do it, but I really wish other cities would follow Chandler's lead because they're just wasting your taxpayer money. And from a other side, if you want to take it from an environmental standpoint, having maintenance and having the production of vehicles that you're basically buying that you don't need is not environmentally friendly, in my opinion. And there's other assets you could share as well. I mean, Mesa buys a $300,000 earth mover, and then Tempe buys a $300,000 earth mover. And they maybe use them 30 or 60 days a year. I mean, they're not using them to their optimum potential, and it just seems insane for everybody to have to buy their own toys. I'll close on one thing, and it was something that happened last night. I ran a bill for the governor on TANF, which is, the version of welfare now. This bill did a lot of things. It had some sticks, it had some carrots. I've worked hard with the Democrats this entire thing through it. In fact, they were praising me of how hard I was working with them on this bill and the governor's office. We started here, we moved to here. We had committee meetings, the Health Committee, Appropriations Committee. We heard their concerns. They were concerned a whole lot about education, and because there's, in order to qualify for this second year, TANF, you have to be in school 90% of the time. They were very concerned about all these, scenarios where a kid might not be at school. We fixed it. We fixed it to their satisfaction. They talked about that 90% of the time in committee. We moved on a whole bunch of other things. They said they were with us. Yesterday, they said they discovered something in the bill that they didn't like, and unless we fix it, they could not be on it. Well, that thing was in there from the beginning. That thing was talked about explicitly ad nauseum in committee. I read it from the floor. It just seems that politics invaded this scenario. I think that they didn't think we had the votes. We did, because of a lot of my Republican brethren, and I thank them for that. It was disappointing that the thing that they didn't like is it said you get a second year if you're fully compliant in the first year. Fully compliant means you don't have any violations. You're doing the work requirements and everything else. They didn't like that. They wanted 2 strikes, 3 strikes, a whole bunch of things. 70% of the people that are on TANF qualify for the second year right now. So 70% of the people would have gotten, well, they're going to get, because we're sending to the Senate, so hopefully it's going to pass. 70% of the people will qualify in the second year, but they held out for the 30% of the people who couldn't follow the rules. I guess I'm just saying it's with how hard I worked to be inclusive with them, meeting with them, addressing all the concerns. It was very disappointing to see politics rear its head at the 11th hour. I'll take some questions, but I know you got to go, so maybe you can talk.
What we'll do is we'll hold our questions till after the speaker gives
That's
up, and then we'll open it up for Q&A.
Okay, J.D. Mesnard is State Representative from Legislative District 17. This includes Chandler, Gilbert, and Sun Lake cities. Having been elected to the Arizona House of Representatives on November 2nd, 2010, he currently serves as Vice Chair of the Committee on Elections and is a member of the Judiciary Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. Born at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, JD has lived in Arizona for over 20 years. He is a small business owner, investor, and consultant, and has always sought to be an active participant at all levels of the community. JD is currently faculty at Mesa Community College, where he teaches courses in political science. Please help me welcome our Speaker of the House, J.D. Mesnard.
All right, thank you very much. Is this thing on? Yep. Testing, you can hear. Okay, that's good. So, Mr. Weninger did a good job pretending he's not tired because it was a long week. So we're at the point in session where we are done hearing House bills in House committees, and then we spent this entire week essentially pushing everything out of the House over to the Senate. They're doing the same thing because next week begins 4 weeks for us to consider their bills in committee and vice versa. So we got done like 11 o'clock last night. So it was a busy day, but a productive day. We're actually well ahead of the Senate in terms of getting things over there, and I expect that the next few weeks we'll be able to cut back a little bit in the House, and folks will get home at an earlier hour. Overall, the session is going well. Mr. Weninger is right. We have had a good working relationship with my friends on the other side of the aisle. Obviously, we disagree vehemently on some important issues. I'm happy to talk about those if they're of interest to you. But as Speaker, it's been my goal to show what statesmanship and civility is like in the legislature. And so and they've done a great job in return. It's one thing that I'm passionate about is we are going to disagree on issues, but we can be reasonable in our approach to doing that. We can remember at the end of the day, we're all on the same team, or we all at least want the same things. We may not agree on the best way to get there, but so it's been a good working relationship with them. And what I'll do is I'll just mention what I think are some of the major topics you may be hearing about out in the news, and then we'll save some time for Q&A, and you're welcome to ask any additional specifics that you'd like. Mr. Weninger brought up the GPLIT bill, the Government Property Lease Excise Tax Bill. That's what GPLIT stands for, in case you were wondering. That basically is a tool that cities use to redevelop areas or to draw in development to areas, but the challenge with it is that it reduces property tax rates. That's the draw for the developers. But it then increases the tax rates on everybody else because it reduces the revenue coming into school districts. That reduces the revenue because there's less tax base. And so, developers end up getting sort of a lower tax rate than everybody else, but everyone else has to make up for it in the way the system works. And so it's a little controversial. Obviously, understand the desire to help develop areas, but on the other side, we want to protect taxpayers and make sure we have a fair property tax system. So there's a big reform moving through, and it was not unanimously supported when we voted on it this week, but it was pretty close. About as close as I've ever seen it. Even those on the other side who were voting no really gave a lot of praise to the sponsor. There's been a lot of that. You're doing a really good job. We're voting no, but we're doing a really good job, and you're almost there. So but that's how the process works sometimes. And to be honest, I jest a bit, but it's nice when you hear that because there's at least an acknowledgement to the hard work that's been going on. So the GPLET bill is a big bill. There is a school choice measure I'm sure you've heard a lot about that is moving in both chambers. It's sort of on pause right now. Its fate I couldn't tell you. It's one of those you either love or you hate. There's another series of measures that are you're probably hearing about. A couple of them would re-refer to the voters the Voter Protection Act that was passed 20 years ago, or some version of it. Now, I know the Chamber has, actually the whole East Valley Chambers have talked about initiative reform. So there are two tracks with regard to the idea of initiative reform. One is statutory, and a bill that we passed yesterday would essentially ban the ability to buy signatures on a per signature basis. So if you're trying to get signatures to qualify for the ballot, more power to you. You can get your grassroots, your volunteers. That's what democracy is all about, to get out there and get the signatures needed for whatever issue the legislature is just saying absolutely not to, that the folks want to go ahead and put on the ballot. But it would not allow folks to buy signatures. We have seen, because of the ability of initiative referendum, which is meant to be a tool for the people, we've seen it be abused by out-of-state special interests. And it's more and more because we have one of the easier processes relative to other states. So what we did is decide to follow in Oregon's footsteps. The state of Oregon did this very thing. They banned the ability to buy signatures, to pay per signature for initiative and referendum, which is fitting because the whole idea of initiative and referendum that's in our Constitution comes from Oregon. A guy named William Uren about 100 years ago or so really pushed these direct democracy concepts in the Oregon Constitution. And they were amended in. Arizona, which just after that was trying to become a state, adopted most of those practices. And so it seems fitting that we're again continuing in Oregon's footsteps. It's been upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court, so I'm sure there'll be a legal challenge to it, but I think we're on pretty solid footing. A version of that bill that was much broader in scope and thus much more controversial is probably what you've been hearing about, but yesterday it was narrowed down to a couple of provisions that I don't know are very controversial, but the main piece is can't buy signatures for initiatives anymore. Let's see. In addition, I'll switch now to the budget. We have 23 new House members of the 60. So development of the budget is as much an educational process of the new members as much as it is a policy-making process and financial decision-making. I had, as Speaker, made a pledge to restore a process that had in recent years been neglected, actually been eliminated entirely, and that was the subcommittee process for the appropriations process. So the subcommittees, there's 3 of them, focus on specific areas of the budget, and they allow for a lot more public input than has existed previously. And so over the last few weeks, those subcommittees have been meeting weekly, and now we're in the process. In fact, 2 of the 3 of them have made recommendations to the broader Appropriations Committee. And then beginning in the next week or 2, that larger Appropriations Committee will begin deliberation over the budget provisions. Now, I want to mention something to you about what I think that process will look like, because there's a lot of questions since we haven't seen subcommittees recently. I have a lot of folks who come to me as Speaker and tell me what their budget asks are. And that is perfectly fine. If you want to talk to me about your budget asks, I will graciously listen, and I will take them into consideration. I will also tell you, every single one, to go talk to the Appropriations Committee. My pledge as well was to make sure that the budget process was a bottom-up process, that the Appropriations Committee, whose task is to put it together, is the one that would in fact put it together, rather than have leadership come to the members and say, here's the budget, dropped in their lap, and you better be with us or else. So again, I'm certainly willing to listen, but I would encourage you, reach out to all the members of the Budget Committee, that is the Appropriations Committee, in the coming weeks. They will be developing the budget on the House side. The Senate's taken a different approach. They have a different membership, a different style. I respect them, but I suspect because this process is going to be bottom up, I would expect also because there's more public input opportunity in the House, that it will take longer in the House. Again, also because there's so many new members that are being brought up to speed and just trying to learn, what was last year's budget, for instance. I am totally okay with that. I have no interest in rushing something through just so we can get done earlier. I want it to be a thorough process, an open and transparent process, and one that has buy-in from the House membership. What will my role as Speaker be? When I know that there's enough votes to pass a budget in the House, I will engage with the Senate President and the Senate leadership, as well as with the Governor's office, to advocate for that budget. That's what I see my role as being. So, again, we could talk about a few other issues, but I'd rather save a little bit of Q&A time with Mr. Weninger and myself. But otherwise, thank you all for your time and for having me here this morning.
All right, questions?
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. I do hear about the civility, and well done. I hear it's been a good session. So just lots of questions could ask, but one in particular, I understand one of the bills kind of coming along through the House has to do with IGAs, intergovernment agreements, that in terms of being renewed every 8 years. That's a concern to me as a city guy, just because water agreements are very long-term and sometimes cash heavy in front, and other types of things with other cities, water plants, water agreements, other types of things. Where's the status of that, and in terms of particularly how that would affect those long-term crucial types of things that this would be a huge blow under its current form?
So I think a lot of those concerns have been conveyed to the bill sponsor. And at this moment, there is not enough support to move the bill. There was an attempt by some to try to negotiate with the sponsor and to address some of these issues. It's her bill, it's her prerogative, and she has decided to essentially not negotiate or to not go any further than she has, knowing that it probably means the votes are not there. So while anything can happen, with that disclaimer, I think it's unlikely the bill is going to move forward.
In this session, lots of people are using the request to speak. So I was wondering, does that play a role when you decide to vote on something?
I'll start with that. It does. I mean, I look at those and see what individuals if they're representing organizations, and testimony. It's, timing, like you said, we were there from 8 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night last night. The speaker gives deference pretty much to the committee chairman how to run their committees. So far, but I haven't had 40 bills on a committee agenda. So far, I've not limited testimony, 3 minutes is, people get beyond that, but we haven't put a timer on anything yet. But again, if you're looking at an agenda and you think it's going to take till 4 in the morning to possibly get done, I do understand why people limit testimony on that sometimes. But I read my emails, I look at the request to speak, I look at mail, I take calls sometimes, people stop me in the courtyard. So all of that comes into play with me and my decision making. But having said that, if there's something I'm just diametrically opposed to, and just because 50 people sign up, doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind. But it definitely makes me curious, makes me look into things more.
I think the request to speak does make a difference. So request to speak essentially allows folks to weigh in on a bill, and it shows up in our system, those for, those against, those neutral. One of the disadvantages is, while it shows names of either lobbyists or individual people or entities and who they represent, it does not say where they are from. And so when we get an email to my office and it's coming into me because they're in my district, that certainly has a greater weight than a series of names. Even if there's a whole lot of them, I don't really know where they're from, because while I certainly want to listen to everybody, and as a speaker I also have a sort of statewide perspective beyond even just District 17, I am more focused on my district. And so there can be parts of the state that are very strongly in favor of this, and this part of the state, maybe my part of the state's on the other side, or you have an urban-rural distinction. That happens quite a bit. So, I would say it makes a difference. Each person, as Mr. Weninger talked about, handles their decision-making process in different ways. I always encourage people to weigh in because it certainly doesn't hurt. Sometimes folks may get frustrated that, like there's all these people signed in, why isn't the committee, voting the way that all these people? But it may be because they have 500 other emails that are different than what are showing up in the system. So I would say it can make a difference. Is it the ultimate decider? It probably depends on the legislator.
When's Chandler going to move from the note cards that you signed that on? Is that what we do? We just sign in note cards? We're supposed to be the tech city.
Question for you, Mr. Speaker. In opening up the budget process and having subcommittees and talking with your members, are you seeing any themes regarding HERF, university bonding, K-12? What are you hearing from your members?
So I'll take them in that order. HERF, which is the Highway User Revenue Fund, money that is supposed to go to roads and is particularly important to rural Arizona because they don't necessarily have the same tax base that we do in Maricopa County. The subcommittee that deals with that issue made a recommendation for an additional $30 million to be restored to HERF. The governor's proposal did not restore HERF. It kept in place a portion of the local HERF. In rough numbers, it's about $60 million to local and $60 million to the state. A few years ago, we restored half of the local on an ongoing basis, but after that, the remaining $90 million has been a year-by-year thing. Last year, we funded almost all of the $90 million with one-time funds, and now we're back this year deciding, what are we going to do, again, on either ongoing basis or one-time basis. The subcommittee has recommended restoring at least the other half of the local piece, again, because of the importance to counties and to rural Arizona. I think it will be exceedingly difficult to get a budget out of the legislature without at least that. The remaining $60 million for more state-oriented projects, I think there's a lot of support for it, but there was zero in the governor's budget. If I was to be critical of the governor's budget, it's probably chiefly this issue, and they know it. They've told me multiple times, we've heard your comments, HERF is a big deal, but we'll negotiate, so that's just part of the process. The university piece, there is in the governor's proposal, additional resources to the universities in the form of reducing or essentially allowing them to keep their sales tax revenue as opposed to remitting it to the state. And then there's a requirement that they do some matching and bond for research, infrastructure, and that sort of thing. I think it's a foregone conclusion that there will be additional resources for the universities, which I'm very glad to hear. However, the mechanism is a little more controversial because once you start going down the road of exempting certain people from emitting their sales taxes, everybody else wants in that deal. And if you take it too far, then you no longer have a TPT system, a transaction privilege tax system, which is what we have, which allows you to tax government entities, even the feds. And if you transition away from that to the sales tax, even though we call it a sales tax, it's actually not that. But if you transition to an actual sales tax, we start to lose a lot of our revenue base. And that creates a whole other set of issues. So I've told Dr. Crow and the universities and the regents that we're going to give additional resources, significant resources to the universities, 20 million or more. However, please don't be married to the mechanism, because right now the legislature seriously resists that mechanism. That being said, in a recent conversation I had with Governor Ducey, he emphasized he really likes the mechanism. So I suspect, in addition to HERF, that issue and I could spend a lot more time talking about it, but that issue is going to be one of serious contention as the budget moves forward. The third piece, just K-12 education in general, universally there's agreement that we're going to give more resources beyond the base and that sort of thing. One of the questions now is, are we going to give, spread it out among a lot of different areas, as the governor did, all good areas, but you can't then give as much, or are we going to reduce them and concentrate on a few areas so that we can do more, like, for instance, teacher salaries? I think it's 50-50 which direction we go.
All right. I know that our speaker does have to leave because he has to teach a class.
I do have a question for the speaker, though.
I can't say no to my mom. So.
No, but with what you said about revenue, like for Chandler, I'm focused on revenue because it's easy to spend money. People can come up with, let's have this program, let's spend it, we need more money here. But generating revenue takes a lot more strategy and talent. So if you would like to share about that aspect, I would love to hear it.
You want to take it first, or do you want me to go?
I think creating, and you wanted to ask your son so he can follow up real quick. I think a couple of the bills that I'm getting behind, he might disagree, does that. I think when you expand jobs and you give our biggest employers, manufacturers, most expensive equipment, a chance and an opportunity to want to grow and expand more here. I think you create jobs. I think you expand the tax base. More jobs, more people. I mean, your Intel announcement recently. I mean, when Intel expanded here, did the Fab 42, it just drives me crazy when I hear people say, well, they never opened it, didn't really do anything. That was the height or the end of the recession. The economy was in tatters. We had so much one-time money from construction sales tax. We're just, build that road, build that road. I mean, we had so much one-time money. My restaurant, Florentino's, during that time was just off the hook busy because there was 5,000 construction workers here making good money, moving their entire families here. It was incredible for Chandler, for Gilbert's, for the state's economy to help plug something right then, all that economic development. So the more taxpayers we have, the more, I think it all plays into it. We transition the TANF bill we're running. We have a great program where we're letting people go to, one thing we put in there was to allow people to use vocational training as part of their job requirements, going out and looking for jobs and stuff. If you're studying a trade, being a cosmetologist, that counts towards that. This will have that. You're getting people out of there and getting them on the tax rolls where they're paying taxes. I think, and you guys have done an incredible job about this, expanding jobs. And I think that's why, with the lowest tax base, lowest cost of service along with Gilbert, but you have an incredible budget. And it's because you have so many taxpayers paying taxes, so many people employed. So to me, it's jobs. That's how you expand the economy, get more revenue.
So Mr. Weninger has, if you were to pick a bill that's focused on the employer side of the job creation equation, he's got the bill of the session, I would say. It's a manufacturing tax-related bill, and I say tax in that it's fudging with our tax code to try to allow for larger employers who have accumulated R&D tax credits, but essentially can't use them because they don't have really enough income tax liability to use them, to allow them to shift those to other areas so that that incentive, which is what the R&D tax credit is, can actually be used. The argument is that it's this big number, it's $1 billion actually, but it's a big number on the books that essentially is just a number, almost meaningless because these companies can't really tap into that. So if you're trying to attract businesses, you can say, hey, we have this R&D tax credit, and they're like, well, but it's only going to be so useful to us. The argument is allow them to use it in some other mechanism. He mentioned
only if there's an economic expansion. They have to build something, a new factory or something in order.
They have to be creating jobs or expanding their business. You mentioned whether or not I agree with it or not. So philosophically, I tend to prefer broad-based tax reforms. I don't tend to like narrower ones because I want to give these types of things to everybody. That being said, there is an acknowledgement that at some point, certain businesses who just have an enormous footprint on the state or on a particular part of the state, like Intel in the case of Chandler, we're trying to compete to keep them here. We're glad they're here. We're glad they're making this $7 billion investment expansion. We want to see more of that. And so there's this balance you're trying to strike between what is the best tax policy, broad-based for everybody, but also one that allows us to be more competitive. I've run a number of these types of bills over the year. Mr. Weninger has the one of the session. Its fate is challenging. Those on the left are universally, at least so far, opposed to it.
No, we got somebody. We got a couple on.
You got okay. He's making some headway. And then there's some on the right who again aren't a big fan of the carve out, targeted type stuff, even if its intention is good. I think overall the idea of job creation is going to be more focused on education this session. Which education is an integral part of a qualified workforce, which attracts businesses. We spent a lot of time with the regulatory aspects and the tax aspects over the last few years, and you're not seeing as much of that this year with the exception of Mr. Weninger's bill. Its fate is unknown at this point. We are moving it in the next step on Monday, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Thank you, Speaker Mesnard. And Representative Weninger, we've got to get Speaker out the door.
Out of here because I made a promise to your schedulers. I would have you out of here.
I'll answer another question too, if that's okay.
Great.
And if they need to reach either of you, what is the best mechanism? Website?
Actually, in the back of our How We Stand document, there is their email addresses on there, and so that's probably the quickest way. And so we have some more over there on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can take a couple more questions if you want. Anyone? Yes, back there.
So we know that the SB 1142 just passed the Arizona Senate. So I was just wondering I know it's going to come to the House. So
Which one is that? I'm sorry.
That's the
I
one.
have 20 bills of my own. I can't even
Okay,
remember
that's the
my
one
own
about
numbers.
the protests. People protesting and they can be arrested
Now
or
I know.
stopped. Right,
Yeah,
right.
I've
So
heard the news.
I know it's going to go to House. So I was just wondering what your point of view or how the House might be.
I haven't. I appreciate the question. I haven't read the bill. I have the general media outline of it. You might be able to figure out or not that I don't always trust the media outline because I've personally, experienced how things get changed. If it's exactly like the media portrays it, I probably won't support it. If it is scrutinizing somewhat and it is going to charge people who are being violent, who are planning a violent attack, then I probably will support it. But if it's just something hey, we're all getting together and having a meeting, let's go down and protest, and then there's a couple idiots who get violent, Rick, he gets violent. So, you know, if he does something like that, but Jack, of course, is a good guy and an innocent bystander, then Jack shouldn't be charged. So I'll have to read the bill, but you know, until I know the exact details, I'm not sure. But that's you know, those kind of scenarios is where I'll fall in general. The violent guy, Rick, yeah.
Couple quick questions, and unfortunately, Speaker left. You guys talk about the process. I think question was asked about the limited amount of citizen initiative, or not initiative, being able to talk at things. What's the conversation about limiting how many bills people can run? You know, I hear numbers 20, 30, 40 bills that people are able to do. There used to be I think it was a House rule at one time that you could have 5 bills. That's one question.
Well, I don't know. Okay, I'll take it real quick. I don't know if that was a rule. There is a rule after, I mean, it's like the 4th day in, you can only drop 7 more bills. And I dropped all 7 of mine. People were coming to me to run bills, and believe me, it wasn't because I'm a genius, but proximity to the 2 leaders of each house, I'm sure had a little something to do with it. Which he's like almost killed one of my bills already. I mean, I had to fight and crawl. So, you know, this favoritism, I could point to 4 of my bills being held in rules. So yesterday to show that he's just using good decision making and not showing me any favoritism. But there hasn't, I mean, a lot of, John Hoopenthal used to drop 60 or 70 bills in a session. It was crazy. I'm running about 19 or 20, and my head is ready to explode. I mean, it's very, I mean, I'm working them hard, but you can, I mean, I look very tired, as you can see. So whatever somebody's bandwidth is what they do. It'd be great not to have, you know, to have less for everybody, yeah. But we are about 200 to 250 less bills this year than what we've had in the previous 2 years. Out of the House.
Okay. My other question is public education is very important, and you represent a school district. Luckily, we have Chandler School District here that's really a powerful district, and which helps keep people like Intel here. In terms of the voucher bill and other education funding from the governor's budget and things like that, where do you stand in terms of supporting public education and making sure that we fund public education before we worry about moving money into every other pot that's out there?
This is a good question. The governor's, you know, I like that the fact the governor wants to put more money in education. I'm yet to be convinced that, like the speaker talked about, this plan of spreading everything out is the way to go. I mean, if I had my druthers, I would just put all the money into teacher salaries. If I had my druthers, what I would do is create a teacher minimum wage, saying that school districts, and maybe it's a little different for rural and city, have to pay a teacher this much, because to me it kind of solves both problems. The Democrats, obviously, and we do too, want teachers to be paid more and get more money in schools. Conservatives say we want the money in the classroom, and they've had a tough time figuring out a mechanism to make sure Chandler Unified does a good job overall and putting the money where it needs to go. They put all the Prop 123 money into teacher salaries. But there are some districts, and they might say, well, it's not the same thing, but there's some districts where it costs $4 or $5 for a lunch, where in CUSD it takes them $2 to make it. And so there's efficiencies that they could all learn from other districts. And if you said, yes, we're giving you this big pot of money, but this is what you're going to pay teachers, they would have to figure out those efficiencies, and they would have to figure out, because they have to pay those teachers, and they can't just say, well, we needed money to bus in kids from 40 miles away. They'd have to figure out those efficiencies, because they have to pay those teachers a certain amount of money. The ESAs, I'm not 100% convinced on. We're going to see where it gets. I've supported the smaller ones in the past. That's expanded. I don't want to see the disabled kids and the at-risk kids not be able to get them because it grows so big. So to me, that's still a work in motion. But there is going to be this tight negotiation with the governor to see, are we going to, you know, do a little bit and all these things, which I think is laudable, but at the same time, why not just kind of put all of our eggs in one basket to start? Bill, how are you?
One more last question, please. Go ahead.
Good to see you.
Thank you. So there's this local control issue, and there have been several bills mentioned, including I think 1 or 2 of yours, where there's a little bit of a, I don't know if you call it conflict, but these guys at this table and some of us who feel we have a great city and we have great leaders, and so photo radar is one of them where the legislatures decide is thinking about kind of overruling local control. What is your philosophy or your thinking in terms of in general, because of your terrific background? Just kind of curious where you stand.
Well, I appreciate it. I guess with me, it's always shades of gray, and some people might like that, some people might not. But I mean, so I guess maybe it makes me more of a moderate. I don't know. I think there's things that absolutely should have local control, and there's a lot of things, I voted against one bill in committee. It's kind of said you don't vote against a fellow member's bill in committee, and this goes for Democrats and Republicans. But the one bill I voted against 2 different times was, and I got reamed for it the last couple of years, was against the rental sales tax, getting rid of it to where, Chandler, it would have been a $6 million hit a year, I think, where you wouldn't be able to charge sales tax on apartments and different things. But there are things that I think that are such overriding nature, I think, that it does warrant the state stepping in when it's of state interest. I think timing of elections is one. I think the fact that Phoenix holds years in off-year elections is a deliberate thing to limit the amount of people that show up. And I think that's of state concern. And there's a few other things, but believe me, and I think some of the council members and Ryan and the city manager and stuff can attest to it. I mean, I'm in constant communication with them. They know pretty much where I'm going to be. I ask for input, and a lot of times there's negotiation, but they're not wondering where I'm going to be, and a lot of times even if I'm kind of leaning the other way, if it's really important to the city, I'll be on their side. Hopefully they would say that.
Thank you, Representative Weninger, for being with us here this morning. We appreciate it. I'd now like to turn to Eric Emmerich from Dorn Policy to give us a legislative update. For those of you that have not met Eric, we work with Eric through the EBCCA. Terry and I meet every Monday morning to go through bills. So we'll turn it over to you, Eric.
There you go.
Check, check. All right. Good morning, everyone. Your agenda probably should have said 3 tired dudes. It's been a long week, and the Speaker and Representative Weninger have done a lot of hard work on your behalf down at the legislature. They covered a lot of the stuff that I was going to talk about, so I'll just touch on a couple subjects that they didn't. One, the Speaker talked about the initiative process. We, as a Chamber Alliance, have had a long-standing position that the Voter Protection Act, just a quick poll, who all is familiar with the Voter Protection Act? It was passed back in 1998. It basically says that you cannot change anything that is passed at the ballot, whether it's a referred item or whether it's an initiated item by the public, unless 3/4 of each chamber furthers the purpose of what was passed at the ballot. That really ties the hands of the state. You can't change things for ebbs and flows in the economy, changes in technology, just societal progress. And we've tried to run pieces of legislation that would put at the top of the ballot that what you're voting on is subject to that. Explain what it does, vote it up or down, but at least know what the practical impact of what you're voting on is. In addition to what the Speaker talked about in terms of statutory changes for the initiative process, we have a couple referrals to the ballot that would deal with the Voter Protection Act. One was amended last night. They're both being run by Michelle Ugenti-Rita out of Scottsdale. And one would put on the ballot a question that would do away with, well, it would actually further the Voter Protection Act in that if half of the qualified electors half of the people eligible to vote an initiative in, then the legislature cannot touch it, period, bottom line, that's it. Practical application of that, we don't get half the electorate to come out during a presidential election. So what that would do would essentially allow the legislature to change things at the ballot, or that had been passed at the ballot. Now, some people don't like that, understand it completely, but again, something that's passed at the ballot is really, really not a good public policy to have things basically cemented in place and unchangeable. Second issue I wanted to talk about is the disability lawsuit issue. Did anyone in the room get hit with a demand letter? Okay. About April, there was a group of unscrupulous attorneys that got together and peppered the Valley with lawsuits regarding their parking, signs not high enough, striping not done. They looked at Google Maps, they did drive-bys, we're calling them drive-by lawsuits. They really took advantage of the disability community and sent out these demand letters and said, you know, your parking lot, your sign is a few inches off, and we're going to sue you, but we'll make this go away if you pay $6,000 in attorney's fees. They peppered the Valley with 24,000 indiscriminate demand letters. And a lot of mom and pop businesses, you know, they don't have $6,000. So the signs that they were being sued for are only $50. So we've tried to work with the disability community or certain advocates within the disability community on a solution. We gave 7 concepts to them. They came back and said we don't like all of them. So Senator Kavanaugh from Scottsdale has dropped a bill that is a notice and cure bill. If you get a notice that your parking lot is not in compliance, then you have a specified amount of time to bring it up to code, and then you're not subject to a lawsuit. If you don't, you are subject to a lawsuit. That's the state body of law. There's also the federal Americans with Disabilities Act. They can still sue you in federal court. It's a lot more challenging process, but at least it will deter these drive-by lawsuits. Over in the House, Maria Sims also has a bill that is moving. It is a voluntary compliance letter. It takes concepts from California, Minnesota, and in the demand letter, you can't ask for money. You are required to have a cooling off period of 60 days, among other things. But again, that's a voluntary process. The way we're looking at this is there's another wave of lawsuits coming. Most of your websites are probably not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. If a blind person online has a reader that's reading through the text on the screen, if you have anything embedded in an image, likely can't pick it up. That's not in compliance. So we're looking at things that there's another tsunami coming of lawsuits, and we're trying to come up with a solution. And we think that's Senator Kavanaugh's bill. So we're pushing that issue pretty hard. It got through committee, which wasn't fun, and we'll hit the House floor or the Senate floor next week. With that, there are a lot of other issues that these gentlemen touched on, but I'd be happy to answer questions.
We have time just for 1 or maybe 2. Questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Eric, very much. And now we'll go to the city updates, and we'll start with Vice Mayor Harkey.
I'll be quick because we've got others that would like to share some things. So we're in the middle of our budget process right now. It's going well. Chandler's got good problems to have. We're not faced with some crises, so we are at a good spot of budget, but at the same time, there's always a certain amount of unknown related to state levels and other things. The good news of Intel type stuff will have a good impact on us, but we're not sure when, because that's down the road. But obviously, as Representative Weninger said, jobs help a whole lot of community, and that will be good for us. So we're in the middle of the process. We did do a budget connect last night. We had over 1,000 people email, text, communicate to us, the highest number ever in terms of our processes. We have gone more electronically. Overall, great responses. People interested, saying that you guys are doing a good job with our money, as our meaning the city, all of our money. It seems to go well. And we're continuing that. We're very conservative in terms of making sure with reserves that we continue to maintain our AAA bond ratings, one of 27 cities in the nation that can actually make that claim in terms of our policies that make us really one of the most enviable city, certainly in Arizona, but one in the nation as well. From our meeting last night, we did have a new company that's moving into Chandler, or consolidating their efforts actually, called Turbo. They're going to be building over 250,000 square foot in terms of inventory space, and condensing their 3 spaces to 1 up on Arizona Avenue, south of Elliott. It's a great family-owned company, kind of 3 generations all working together, and they were fun to listen to at our council meeting last night. Again, lots of good news in Chandler, but certainly give opportunity to the others to share.
Thank you. And yes, Turbo. So I'm an aviation enthusiast. So, they have, they're going to have 250,000 square feet of space, which is really exciting. They have 14 million, they're an aircraft parts company, 14 million parts for aircraft, which is really cool. And so they're going to be located we're rolling out what's called Uptown Chandler. So on the north part of Arizona, as you go north from downtown Chandler, we're definitely emphasizing what we're doing with redevelopment there and the excitement, because there's a lot of great things happening in Uptown Chandler. So be sure to go by there, and we have a lot of great retail, things like that. And then Tuesday, we have Eat Your Art Out for the Chandler Center for the Arts. There's restaurants that you can eat at. And then a portion of what you spend will go towards our supporting our Chandler Center for the Arts. Oh, okay, Sevrar. Yeah, okay. So the Southeast Valley Association of Realtors, Sevrar, 12,000 members, is relocating from Mesa to Chandler. So they're building out by the airport, and they're helping to make us famous. So there, thanks. Thanks, Vice Mayor.
Do I want to mention the downtown space, oh, right, that's what you're, there's the stage in the downtown area. What Mr. Vice Mayor was reminding me to talk about is that area in front of the library has a large park-like area, and so in order to use that area in its most effective way and make it easy for us to properly patrol that with our public safety folks and make it the best use for the city of Chandler, we're going to designate that area as a park. Nice, about right? That's about right. So, Row Park? Yeah. But, yeah, we had a great evening last night with the Budget Connect, and we have a development agreement with LGE, and so Flick's Brewhouse, I believe, and I think most of us believe, is truly going to become a reality, and that's on Site 3 at Arizona Avenue, Chandler Boulevard, and so you're really going to, I think that's really going to happen. They're shooting for December of this year on that, and hey, they've got their work cut out for them, but so far they've been making all the markers. So I won't talk about Turbo, except for they were pretty entertaining last night at the council meeting. Alma School on Chandler Boulevard, the street improvements there are continuing, and there's discussion to try and make sure that as roads are improving all over the city of Chandler, that hopefully not too many of those projects overlap with each other, so that people can get around, and so that is being thought about. So when you're frustrated and stuck in traffic, we are thinking about you and trying to make the best plan. And of course, the city, a lot of great news coming out. You know about that, but our our economic development staff, Micah, James, Ryan, and Kim. They are just doing a great job, and they're getting tons and tons of phone calls, and they're measuring the city hall for more office space and bigger offices and that sort of thing. That's tongue in cheek, but they definitely are earning their money these days. Lots of things going on there. Some disappointing news. We learned that Tim Bricker with Dignity Health is going on to another opportunity for himself, which is Chandler's loss, I think. And I think I've got most of that right there. Oh, the budget, a couple of things very quickly. The budget is important, and we always have to take a long look at that. Chandler in this past year spent $42 million to make sure that we have a 100-year supply of water. That is looking forward, just as past councils have done, and we want to do the same thing, whether that is staffing for our public safety personnel or other things that will have long-lasting effects and in our community. So that's my news.
Thank you very much. On your tables, underneath your agendas, there is also a notice. We are trying to help the city disseminate this information. There is on the proposed utility rate changes. They are seeking input on this. There is one more chance to give your input, and that's on Tuesday, February 28th at 3 p.m. And the information is on there. So please, please make sure that because these rates will go into effect October 1st of this year. So please give your comments on there. And then I'll turn it back over to one of our tri-chairs.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for coming out and spending your morning with us. I wish you a great weekend. We will see you back for public policy. Please note March 10th, we will not meet. We hope to see you out at the Chandler Chamber Ostrich Festival. We will see you back on the 24th. We'll have an update from Washington with Congressman Andy Biggs, as well as our District 18 delegation. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here at the end of March.